So, as one does, I've been thinking. And in fact, I've been thinking about so many Lego related topics that I didn't actually know what I wanted to talk about today. And then, right across the room, I saw it looking at me and I thought, well, here we go. The most successful theme of the last 3 or 4 years now, and it's the one that lots of people talk about, lots of people praise. However, I don't feel anyone necessarily looked at it in depth, and that is, of course, Lego's Botanical Collection. What set has sold more copies than 2021's Roses? You can't name any. It's truly impossible to name a set that has sold more roses. And I can speak from experience on this one, not because I'm a sales agent or anything, but because how many people have tasked me what my recommendation is, and how many people have said, oh, they really like the look of the flowers. And we're going to go over why today. I'm going to talk about it because the Botanical Collection has become a mainstay of the Icon sub-theme, the adult welcome branding, and adored by almost all fans universally. And quite frankly, I think it's been a absolutely huge hit in the sales department. And that all started in 2021 with the addition of the first 2 sets to the collection. So join me as we ramble and talk about it, because I really like the pretty flowers and I want to talk about that today. So, starting off in 2021, this Icon sub-theme was launched as part of the Adults Welcome branding to try and get more adults into Lego. It's since been marketed more as a therapy, I guess, as well as multiple other aspects. And there's one specific set, that being the Roses, which has stood out above all else. We'll get into that why. But first, I wanted to reiterate how many times I walk down the street and see these guys just in people's windows. It's genuinely shocking. It's by far the most Lego I see when I go out and about, right? I can be walking down the street and in someone's ground floor window there'll be a bouquet. And quite often that bouquet isn't actually made up of 10280 flower bouquet or even 10313 the wildflower bouquet. Instead, it's made up of a collection of roses, tulips, sunflowers, and occasionally the lotuses and daffodils, although less so for these guys because they're newer, in a vase. And it's the smaller sets, the £10 one, that have really had the wide range. Specifically, of course, 2021's Roses. This was sort of the big name drop, and while everyone was sort of falling in love over the flower bouquet and the bonsai tree, and then what would later become the best of the bunch, the orchid, the small roses were consistently out of stock and serving the company very well. 1, their cheap price, 2, the iconic nature of them, and then 3, the fact that they were roses. This was a really, really easy gift for birthdays of partners, for Valentine's Day, and many other celebrations, or just if you wanted a cute nerdy gift for a friend or someone you care about at any time of the year. Roses are eternal. They're this wonderful symbol, and it doesn't help. It helps a lot that they're really well built too. All of these flowers showcase amazing techniques, and it's led to a real level of respect for the recolors, the usefulness of the parts, and the fun experience of building them. Now, when we talk about Adults Welcome, we often talk about the idea of trying to bring adults into this as a calming experience. And the flowers are another particularly good example of this due to the limited variety in the steps, the simplistic and the interesting techniques to sort of keep you on your toes, but also a fair level of repetition, which to a lot of fans could be annoying, but to adults new to the genre is actually quite calming, or so I've been told. I feel mixed on that. And the roses, along with the other sets, definitely offer that, as the flowers themselves offer a slight variation, but generally a fairly simplistic thing. They also take full advantage of the Lego system in being able to be rearranged or reposed using hinges, or even you could shorten the stems and mix and match by combining different sets, leading to a real great display of displayability. Another thing is their price. Of course, the small flowers are all priced at sort of $9.99, $12.99. However, even the biggest sets, like the flower bouquets themselves, or even the succulents and dried flower centerpiece, never really hit £60 here in the UK, or even $60. The one exception, of course, being the Bird of Paradise, but we'll get onto that one later. Which meant they were affordable. They were affordable as gifts. They were affordable as a treat to an adult on a job, so that if they were just curious or wanted to try something new, they were a perfect entry point, unlike the many multi-hundred-pound sets that you can buy on the market. Secondly, they're great as a gateway because they're not too intrusive. Think about how they can be displayed, right? They're fairly simplistic. They look good on a shelf. People don't realize they're Lego from a distance. They don't really take up much of your space and your time or your precious room in these days quite small houses, which is great. They're all self-contained. In fact, the bouquets were marketed so that they could fit in already existing vases, meaning really you were just trading expensive real plants that you would have to replace on a semi-regular basis to ones that live eternally and can be forever rearranged. And that was a really appealing concept to many. In addition to all of this, there's plenty of other factors to consider, specifically stuff like the universal nature of the flowers and how expressive they feel in a weird, unique way. We've already mentioned the idea that they're small and take up less space, but also just the idea that they can be seen by multiple people and it doesn't feel as nerdy or awkward as maybe some things. Also, from that perspective, they're very, very approachable from an external knowledge. Although the modular buildings are lovely and the architectures are incredibly detailed, it's a pretty hard sell to say, hey, here is this niche building with this niche thing in a minifigure scale system that has some wonderful details and you'll really enjoy the build of, but then you'll be tempted to buy more and it's sort of a bit overwhelming and daunting, not to mention the more expensive price. Whereas here, you could obviously start off with the roses or tulips, sunflowers, etc., or even at a slightly higher price, depending on your partner or whoever, and it succeeds, and then it's expanded at your choice or as a gateway to the rest of LEGO. And that's been very, very clear. The Botanicals are clearly the gateway entry point for many, many fans, and mainly because they've been given as gifts. Fans of LEGO appreciate them, so decide that they are appropriate for non-LEGO friends or family to be introduced to the system with. So let's quickly go through them one by one and talk about their relative successes. So the first release wave came in January 2021 with two sets, two very different sets, and one that has a little bit more interest to it. We're going to talk about that one first. So this wave was made up of the flower bouquet and the bonsai tree, with the bonsai tree being the unique one here. While definitely still part of the botanical collection, it is definitely the more odd of the two, as it feels like it sinks more into the lifestyle sub-theme, which we've now seen continued with stuff like the tranquil gardens and so on. It almost inspired its own range in a sense, and it doesn't really feel like the botanical collection that we've grown to know. However, it did start this tradition of one of the botanical collection sets being a little bit more off-piece each year. And in a way, that tradition has continued in the botanical collection, as we can see in subsequent years, followed by the succulents, dried flower centerpiece, and then this year with the tiny plants. In that way, the bonsai tree definitely does fit here, as I mentioned. However, the experience is completely different and isn't really connectable to others. I definitely feel that this set was a lot less popular than the flower bouquet, however, it definitely still did incredibly well. However, it's probably why we never saw anything similar to it in the botanical collection, instead leaving the tranquil garden to follow up along this aesthetic. However, the model itself is fantastic, and the use of pink frogs was the beginning of the part usage that we would see across this sub-theme. The flower bouquet was definitely, at least to me, the most popular of the two. In fact, it's still on shelves today. Incredible part recolours and great usage. This was something we'd never seen before and really, really felt fresh. Organic shapes are obviously incredibly difficult, so to see pieces like car fenders and the three-leaf piece do such an incredible job was amazing. Now, this set was criticised initially when it came out for not having a vase, which is fair enough, to be honest. I still wish that they'd done like a special edition packaged version where it came with a vase or something, and like they used to do with like containers back in Adventurers, like the Egyptian mummy and so on. But really, this set was spectacular. It was the first of its kind of breath of fresh air. However, these days, it feels a little more antiquated just because everything that's come since has been even better. Later in that summer, we got the Birds of Paradise, which is perhaps the most beloved of the sets, coming in with a ridiculous price tag of somewhere in like the range of £70 to £90. Only 3 flowers, a massive pot build that seemed to suck all of the piece count, and these really large leaves, which while accurate to the flower, just were so different. It also just looks the most fake, and therefore the most unappealing. And as I mentioned, one of the huge advantages to this range is its cheaper price point, so that did it no favours at all as well. Released alongside that year were the aforementioned roses, which I have to imagine are one of the best-selling sets of all time, and that is only furthered by the fact that they had a follow-up set all to themselves, but these things were consistently out of stock. So you had people buying multiple of them, you had people giving them for Valentine's gifts, to friends, for parties, and everything. These things were absolutely everywhere, and has to be one of the biggest recommendations. Similarly, the tulips were a lot less successful, but also did look great. These ones were a lot more simple, but they were a great addition if you had the bouquet, and could be added to them as well. And that was the initial lineup. Initially, I think everyone's recommendation went to the bouquet. If you were buying these as a gift or recommending someone to get into it, the bouquet showed off techniques, what LEGO was all about, and left you with a wonderful end product. However, to me, it's still not going to be the end point or like the highest point that we reached. Sales-wise, the roses are definitely taking the cake. However, my recommendation goes somewhere else. In 2022, we had our second lineup. This was the orchid and the succulents, along with the smaller sunflowers. The sunflowers were a really logical and great addition to the smaller set, working well for kids as well as to expand on the already existing sort of lineup. They're also a different technique and built very, very differently from everything that we'd had so far, so were a fantastic idea for adding to the system. The odd set this time around was the succulents, which did a really great job at capturing the 9 succulents in a sort of more larger form. The rearrangeable nature was great, however, obviously the fact that you could separate them was also beneficial. Although I do believe that as a display aspect, they worked better when you cluster them as either as 9s or 3s, as I think for an adult just getting into it, the idea of splitting out them over different shelves would be a little bit daunting or a little bit space consumptive. But when it all fits down into this 9 square grid, it can easily take up a shelf, small desktop, or even just on the next to your computer. And I think that works really, really well. They look great from all angles, they're all recognizable, and they're all sort of a suitable build. You'll hear me complain later about pots and things taking up too much of the parts budget, but here they were done pretty minimalistically, and most of the build clearly is focused on the succulents, which is the way it should be. So overall, pretty impressive and a really nice addition to the collection. Something different to appease a different group of plant fans, which was exactly what the theme needed. And I think the success again for this one showed, although once again, the standout for this one was the orchid. Now this was the plant in the pot done right. Not only did the pot only take up less of the budget, the price was able to come in at still the 44 or 54 pound or dollar mark, whatever you want to say. The techniques on show here were some of the most advanced that we've seen in the theme, and although not super spectacular in any regards, everything on show was flawlessly done, including the angles of the stems and the fact that you can rearrange the placements of the flowers, the recolored demigorgon heads. This is my recommendation as the best botanical set to introduce a newcomer to LEGO, as it shows the techniques, the maths, the detail, and you get a beautiful product at the end that people don't recognize. It truly is stunning and potentially one of the best sets ever released in my opinion. It is also the perfect entry piece into the system if you're not counting $10 roses. And then that did it for that lineup, and to me the orchid was mine. I bought that one because I knew it was absolutely incredible and I had to own it, and then we wouldn't see any more botanical sets until 2023 when we saw the next bouquet, which I think was a little controversial upon release. This is the wildflower bouquet. It focuses on a more bright and upbeat colour scheme, which to me felt a little unrealistic to start with, but looking back it really does make the 2021 flower bouquet feel like a prototype in a way. The colours were a lot more vibrant, a lot more muted, and I wonder if they would clash in a bouquet. I need to watch some more reviews or potentially just buy it for myself, but it covered so much more ground and was so vibrant that we couldn't help but fall in love with the recolored pirate hats, the oars flowers that felt similar to sunflowers but still very, very unique, and along with all of the other parts that appeared in this set. Again, it was utterly fantastic, a great addition. We needed a new bouquet to like mix flowers between the two, and although I think I still prefer the simplicity and what has become iconic about 2021 one, truly a set for the Walk of Fame, the wildflower bouquet does exceed it in almost every capacity. Although who knows if that was replicated in sales. Also that year, the odd set was the dried flower centerpiece. This one was really, really unique, and I think was sort of an unsung hero. It's absolutely beautifully done with so many muted colors, and it really would work on a table. The fact that you can combine them together to expand it is great, although I don't think the building experience is enjoyable for that kind of repetition. However, from talking about the repetition or therapy side of things, it does work incredibly well. The corn stalks look great, the flowers look great, and although the flower design from the wildflower bouquet is repeated here, they came out in the same wave, so it's hard to say that they stole it from each other. This one also looks fantastic, and there's another one that I was more than happy to own. Also that year were two smaller sets. We had the daffodils and the lotus flowers. The daffodils were then re-released in 2024, but for no real reason, just for a packaging change. They look great. It's nice to have them for St. David's Day and their iconicity in the UK. But again, pretty simple flower, but it was a new technique for us to see, and it's great to have more of these flowers that people recognise show up. The lotus flowers were again a great choice. However, I do question why they're on stems and say not on lily pads. However, I can't fault it. They do look great, and I think look awesome in a small vase, so another perfect addition. Then for 2024, and as mentioned, we had the re-release of the daffodils, but joining the small lineup was the cherry blossoms. Very unique take that I think will be popular with certain people, but definitely not really the most standout of the lineup. But then we have the new two big sets, the odd one being tiny plants, which we're going to come back to. I've talked extensively about my dislike for this one. And then the bouquet of roses. Which is very clear why we have a full bouquet of roses. It's because the 2021 roses were so popular, and these ones are definitely an upgrade. They look perfect, they look wonderful, they're so much more accurate using the whips and curls, and it works great. I think this set is also going to be incredibly popular. However, I do think that the main Botanicals price point of bringing it up to a bouquet will damage sales slightly compared to the £10 ones. However, it's still great to see. They look incredibly lush, incredibly highly detailed. This is why the people love the Botanical collection. To have 3 different varieties in here, you've got that repetition, but also that amassability. This bouquet is exactly what people wanted from the slightly nerdy, long-lasting flower line. So Very, very cool. However, again, the £10 ones are still stealing the show. And then we have tiny plants, my least favourite of all of the sets by far, because although it does a job at recreating what it is, they're all recognisable as plants. Too much of the part budget goes into pots. Now, if you want to hear my thoughts on this more in detail, look at my 2024 sets video where I go over why I dislike it for about like 10 minutes flat. While all the plants here are recognisable, I think they look juniorised. Some of them basically only use about 4 or 5 parts. The really decent ones here are the ball cactus and I don't know, I guess the Venus flytrap or the stone plant, but they're all in tiny pots, they're so space restricted, and the idea of there being 9 of them that you have to spread out on shelves and stuff, it feels a little overwhelming compared to just a one single model that you plonk on a counter. This doesn't really feel like we're showing off all of the best aspects of the theme either. So as far as an introduction for a newcomer, I just don't think that this set really shows everything that Botanicals has to offer. Specifically, I think the orchid does a much better job. Any of the bouquets or any of the small flowers, apart from maybe the daffodils, do a much better job. And I think the roses in particular are another standout. So really, it just doesn't quite fit for me. And I think if you're recommending it to people, I wouldn't recommend tiny plants. But I've seen a lot of chatter. I've seen a lot of non-Lego people talk about it, and they ask me what I think about it, which is why we're even doing this, because I have thoughts and I want to share them to avoid. So yeah, I don't think that they quite hit the brief for what you'd be looking for in introducing someone to the Botanicals. But beyond that, really, I don't have much else to say. I think they're perfect. It's such a smart idea, and I really enjoy seeing the theme every year, and I hope we see more and more and more, and then I hope that it continues to impress each time. Really, it's some of the strongest performance, and it's got to be showing in the sales as well. It's such a wider audience that they can capture that I think it was just one of the biggest surprises come out as welcome. And to be consistently affordable and consistently bringing people into the wider ecosystem, it really has earned its place in the Hall of Fame next to stuff like the Modular and Winter Village, which we look forward to every year. Although while Modulars will always be my heart and soul, I need to get back on eBay and start looking for some of these flowers at discounted prices, because I've got to get that bouquet. I think it's about time. But let me know your thoughts on the Botanical collection down below. What is your favourite, and do you think I'm right? Does it deserve all of the praise that it gets from me and the community? So let me know all your thoughts down below, and I will see you next week with another Lego Zelda video, of course. But I hope you enjoyed this tangent. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.